When Taehyung stood by Jimin during a brutal fight with Jungkook, he never expected Jungkook's revenge to expose a truth that would break them all. You don't know what he did, Taehyung. Jimin's voice cracked through the silence of the dressing room, his hand trembling as he pointed at Jungkook, who stood frozen, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might snap. The light bulbs above the makeup mirror buzzed faintly, casting sharp reflections off the silver handles of the wardrobe. The atmosphere smelled of stage fog, fabric softener, and something acidic, like sweat mixed with betrayal. All 7 members had just stepped off the final rehearsal stage at Seoul Olympic Stadium, but the backstage room now felt like a courtroom. I said calm down, Taehyung growled, stepping protectively between them. This isn't the place. But Jimin shoved past him, eyes glassy, skin flushed. You think I care anymore where it is? You think I care if anyone hears? Jimin, Jungkook's voice was low. Deadly. His fists hung at his sides, half wrapped with the black stage gloves he hadn't finished removing. Say it then. Say what you've been saying behind my back. You're good at that. Taehyung's stomach turned. He looked between them, Jimin shaking like he might fall apart, and Jungkook. Jungkook burning with that cold rage he only ever unleashed when someone had really crossed a line. Just an hour ago, they had laughed together on stage, the crowd screaming so loud the floor trembled. And now this. Jean, RM, and Junggi had left early to talk to management. Hoseok was still changing in another room. No one else was there to de-escalate. Only Taehyung. Whatever happened between you two, Taehyung said carefully, eyes locked on Jungkook, it can't be worse than what we lose if we break like this. We're not just. You don't know anything, Jungkook cut in sharply. His eyes flashed to Jimin, then back to Taehyung. You think you're defending him? You think you're saving something? He laughed once bitterly. You're not saving him. You're exposing yourself. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Jimin stopped breathing for a moment. Exposing what? Taehyung asked slowly. Jungkook turned away, grabbing his jacket. Ask him. The door slammed behind him. Taehyung's heart pounded. He looked at Jimin, but Jimin couldn't even meet his eyes. Instead, Jimin slumped against the dressing table, running a shaky hand through his damp hair. You shouldn't have defended me, he whispered. Taehyung didn't go after Jungkook. He stood in that dressing room for a full minute, watching Jimin's reflection in the mirror, chest heaving, jaw clenched, the red in his eyes blooming like an infection that had no name. The buzz of the fluorescent lights above them sounded louder now, like static eating away at silence. You shouldn't have defended me, Jimin repeated, this time almost inaudibly, like the words were made of ash and regret. Taehyung took one step forward. Then another. What did he mean by ask him? What is it I'm supposed to know, Jimin? Jimin laughed bitterly and wiped at his eyes with the sleeve of his oversized hoodie. It doesn't matter. It matters to me. You don't understand, Jimin whispered. Then make me understand. Something broke then, Taehyung couldn't name it, but he saw the fracture ripple across Jimin's face. A line that ran deeper than just anger at Jungkook. A line drawn long ago in secrets and shame. Jimin didn't answer, the group chat exploded. RM, what the hell happened backstage? Manager Nim just called me. Yoongi, this better not be about the live camera leak. Jungkook left the group chat. Taehyung's eyes widened at the notification. He looked over at Jimin, who sat curled on the edge of his hotel bed, knees drawn up to his chest, phone turned face down. Silent. Fragile. Did you see that? Taehyung asked. Jimin nodded once. He's making sure you take his side. That's not fair. Isn't it? Jimin's voice was hollow. You think he left the chat to avoid conflict? He left to create it. Now the others will ask why he left. And they'll come to you. Taehyung's blood chilled. You really think he's manipulating the group? Jimin looked at him then, really looked. Taehyung, do you remember the night you came to my apartment last year, crying over your dad's stroke? When you said Jungkook was the only one who didn't text you. Yeah, Taehyung murmured, his throat tightening. He did text you. What? He texted me. I saw it. He drafted the message but never sent it. Taehyung froze. Why didn't you tell me? Because he was with her. That stopped time. Taehyung's voice dropped to a whisper. With who? Jimin held his gaze. The stylist. The one that used to handle your wardrobe. The one you... No, Taehyung said immediately, backing away like the air had turned to fire. You're lying. I wish I was. Taehyung staggered backward, collapsing into the chair beside the small round table. The room seemed to tilt. That was the worst week of my life. Jimin's voice cracked. I know. And Jungkook, he knew. He was with her in your building, Tae. Taehyung's fists balled in his lap. His breathing turned shallow. That wasn't just betrayal. That was war. That was premeditated silence. The conference room was cold and lifeless, with frosted windows and half-empty coffee cups lining the table. Bang Si-hyuk didn't sit. He stood at the head of the table, arms folded, scanning the room like a general staring down a battlefield. You think I don't hear everything? His voice was quiet but thunderous in weight. There's a video. One of you slamming a door backstage. Another of Jimin yelling. And someone leaked audio from rehearsal. Jimin stared at the table. Taehyung sat beside him, jaw tense. Where's Jungkook? Bang asked. Silence. Where's he? Taehyung raised his head. He walked out after rehearsal. I don't think he went back to the hotel. A pause. Find him. Bring him here. Now. 2 hours later, parking garage level B2. Taehyung found him. Sitting alone in the driver's seat of his matte black Genesis GV80, window half down, engine off, music playing low, Radiohead's Exit music for a film. Jungkook didn't look surprised to see him. You came. Taehyung stepped closer. Bang wants you back. So does the group. And what about you? Jungkook asked. Do you want me back? Taehyung swallowed. I want the truth. Jungkook nodded slowly. You want the truth about the stylist? About the texts? About why I never showed up for you when you were breaking apart? Yes. Jungkook looked straight ahead. She was pregnant. The words hit Taehyung like a hammer to the ribs. What? She was pregnant, Taehyung. I found out that night. I couldn't deal with it. I wasn't ready to be the one who caused another scandal. So I chose silence. Taehyung staggered back a step, hands shaking. You were going to be a father? I still don't know if it was mine. The garage felt 10 degrees colder. Why didn't you tell me? Taehyung whispered. Jungkook turned his head finally, his eyes gleaming. Because I knew you'd forgive me. Taehyung's voice cracked. And Jimin? Why attack him? Jungkook's stare hardened. Because he knew. He saw the message. He could have covered for me. Instead, he waited until you were weak. And then he came to your apartment. A long pause. He comforted you when I was supposed to be the one. Taehyung's eyes welled. So you've been punishing him for being there for me? No, Jungkook said quietly. I've been punishing myself. When Jungkook walked into the room, the silence was suffocating. Jimin looked up but not at his face. Only at his hands. No one spoke. Until Jungkook did. I have something to say. Everyone turned. He looked straight at Taehyung, then at Jimin. Whatever I've done to hurt either of you, you're right to hate me. But if I could go back, if I could take that night again, I'd choose the pain. I'd choose you over silence. Then he turned and left again. This time, no one stopped him. Not even Jimin. Not even Taehyung. The door hadn't even clicked shut behind Jungkook before Jimin stood up, spine stiff with something like fury or grief, maybe both. Taehyung didn't speak. Couldn't. His fingers dug into the armrest of the conference room chair, eyes still fixed on the spot where Jungkook had stood, replaying every word. I'd choose you over silence. But which you? The question clawed at him. It wasn't clear anymore. Had Jungkook meant Jimin? Taehyung? Had it all been a miscalculation, a maze of regrets and pride? I need air, Taehyung muttered, rising slowly. Jimin's voice stopped him. He wasn't lying. Taehyung turned. About the pregnancy. About the message. About me showing up at your place. Taehyung studied him in silence, torn between gratitude and suspicion. You should have told me, he said quietly. I couldn't, Jimin snapped, his voice raw. I was protecting you. From what, Jimin? From yourself. Jimin shouted. The walls echoed the sound. Somewhere outside the glass, and in turn froze mid-step. Jimin took a breath, then another, like he might break. I saw what that silence did to you. You sat in your apartment, drinking, refusing to speak, blaming yourself for something you didn't understand. If I told you the truth back then, Tae, you wouldn't have hated him. You would have hated yourself. Taehyung's throat tightened. Jimin stepped closer. You think I wanted to be the one holding you while you broke apart over someone else's betrayal? You think I enjoyed being your second choice? Then why did you come? Jimin's voice broke. Because I didn't go to him. That landed like a crack of thunder. I didn't go to Jungkook because I loved you. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. The room was packed, legal counsel, media managers, even a damage control team flown in from Tokyo. Rumors had already begun to swirl across fan communities. Leaked rehearsal audio, a blurred clip of Jimin's outburst, and Jungkook's sudden silence on social media. Bang Si-hyuk stood in front of a whiteboard. We can't let this escalate. If we don't manage the narrative, the fans will. Junggi leaned back, arms crossed. Then give them a narrative. RM cut in. Not a lie. We've done that before. It always blows up later. The strategist, a sharp woman in a black suit with an earpiece, adjusted her file. We suggest a controlled release, footage from rehearsals, a few heartfelt posts, and a staged apology event. No, Taehyung said suddenly. Everyone turned. We're not staging anything. Bang narrowed his eyes. You think silence is better? I think truth is better. Jimin sat still, hands clasped in his lap, not even flinching. The strategist replied, the truth is dangerous. You want to admit your top artists had a breakdown backstage over personal history? Taehyung looked at Jimin, then back at Bang. I'd rather be hated for being human than worshipped for being fake. The group hadn't returned here in days, not since the rehearsal incident. But today they had no choice. The agency ordered a full regroup. All 7 members. Face to face. Jungkook arrived first. He was quiet. Worn out. Hood up, hands deep in his jacket pockets. He sat at the end of the long table in the kitchen where they used to eat ramen at 2 a.m. after shows. Where laughter used to echo like family. Now it was quiet like a morgue. Yoongi arrived next. Then Jeon and Hoseok. Namjoon last. And finally Taehyung and Jimin. No one spoke. Until Jeon broke the tension. Someone needs to say it, he muttered. We're falling apart. Yoongi snorted. We're not falling apart. We're already pieces. Then what do we do? Hoseok asked, eyes darting between Jungkook and Jimin. Namjoon leaned forward. We decide if this is still worth fighting for. The silence that followed was brutal. Taehyung stood slowly. I am. All eyes turned to him. I don't care what was said. I don't care what wasn't. We built something together that no one else on this planet understands. And I'm not walking away because feelings got in the way. Jungkook scoffed. You think that's what this is? Taehyung turned to him. Isn't it? Jungkook stood up too. You think I chose silence because of feelings? I chose silence because I was scared. Scared of losing this. Of losing you. Of being seen as a monster. His voice cracked. I was never the strong one, Taehyung. You were. You always were. Something in Taehyung's face softened. I'm not anymore. Then Jimin spoke, quiet but firm. None of us are. Later that night, private room, Taehyung's apartment. The city lights bled into the room through the floor-to-ceiling glass, streaking reflections over the hardwood. Taehyung stood by the window holding a glass of soju untouched. Jimin stepped beside him. Neither of them looked at the other. I meant what I said, Jimin said softly. I know. I didn't go to him because I loved you. I know. A long pause. I still do. Taehyung closed his eyes. The weight of the night, the agency, the confrontation, the years of hidden pain settled into his chest like an anchor. I don't know what to do with that, he whispered. You don't have to do anything. But I want to. Jimin turned his head toward him, barely breathing. Taehyung finally looked at him, eyes red, jaw trembling. Just, not yet. The air between them was thicker than silence, something rawer, something on the verge of collapse. Taehyung hadn't moved from the window since those final words left his lips. Jimin sat on the edge of the couch now, his hands resting like dead weight between his knees as if afraid that any motion would shatter the fragile truce hanging between them. The clock ticked. You should have told me everything sooner, Taehyung said finally, voice gravelly from restraint. Jimin didn't flinch. And what would you have done, Taehyung? Told me to go? Told him to stay? Taehyung turned around, slow and stiff like something ancient had cracked inside his chest. I would have chosen neither of you. Jimin's jaw tensed. Exactly. A beat. Then another. I was already burning when I walked into your apartment that night, Jimin continued, quieter now. But I let it happen because I thought maybe I could take a little of your pain into mine. Maybe if I carried it for a while, you'd breathe again. Taehyung stepped forward. Then why did you let me think I was crazy? Why did you let me spiral? Because you were supposed to spiral with him, Jimin spat suddenly, rising to his feet. Not me. You were supposed to hate him, cry with him. Not me. Not the one who sat on your floor while you stared at your dad's photo like you wanted to die. Taehyung stared at him, face pale. You don't think I wanted that with you? No, Jimin said, shaking his head. I think I was the substitute. A safer Jungkook. Taehyung's lips parted as if to argue, but the truth was too heavy. He couldn't breathe through it. Jimin laughed bitterly. You looked at me like you were looking for someone else. Taehyung walked over and gripped Jimin's face, gently but firmly. And you looked at me like you wanted to be punished. Silence. Jimin blinked, stunned by the accuracy. Because I did. Their breath mingled, unsteady, tense. Neither of them spoke for a long time. And then, there was a knock at the door. Neither of them moved. Another knock. Then a voice calm, low, unmistakably tired. It's Jungkook. Jimin stepped back instinctively. Taehyung hesitated, then crossed the room and opened the door. Jungkook stood there, under the yellow hallway light, holding a USB drive in his right hand. I need you both to see something. No one spoke. He stepped inside without waiting for an answer. The laptop was open on the kitchen table. Jungkook inserted the drive, fingers trembling slightly as he clicked open a folder titled simply, January. Taehyung sat on one side of the table. Jimin remained standing, arms crossed, watching Jungkook like he was a ticking bomb. The video played. It was rehearsal footage, dated 3 months ago. But it wasn't from an official camera. Who took this? Taehyung asked, confused. Jungkook didn't answer. In the video, Jimin was alone in the dance room, rehearsing. He moved with rage, precision, fury. Then the door opened off camera and a voice echoed into the room. You think he'd choose you? Jungkook's voice. You think if you play the broken one, he'll forget what we had? The real-life Jungkook didn't blink. Just let the footage play. You think Taehyung doesn't already see what you're doing? The video Jungkook continued. He's not stupid, Jimin. He knows you're manipulating his guilt. Jimin's face in the video was unreadable. He said nothing. Just stared at the mirror. Then finally he whispered something. You chose to be a ghost. The video ended. Taehyung sat frozen. Jimin turned away from them both. Why would you show this? Because I want you to know that I'm not innocent, Jungkook said. And you think that's enough? Jimin's voice cracked. You think dragging me down with you somehow makes this right? No, Jungkook said, quiet and resolute. I think if we don't burn this to the ground, we'll keep pretending we're okay. Taehyung stood slowly. So burn it then. Say it all. Here. Now. Jungkook's eyes didn't leave Jimin. I loved him, Jungkook said. Taehyung's breath caught. Jimin turned around sharply. I love Taehyung, Jungkook repeated. But I let my fear poison it. I let jealousy bury it. And I let you take my place, Jimin, because I wanted to watch you suffer like I did. Taehyung stepped back as if the air itself had turned to knives. I thought, he began, but his throat gave out. You thought I loved her? Jungkook said almost tenderly. I used her. Taehyung swallowed the bile rising in his throat. You were mine, Jungkook said, looking at him like a man on trial. But I never deserved you. Jimin whispered, and what about me? You were the collateral. The room exploded. Jimin charged forward, shoving Jungkook so hard he stumbled into the fridge. Taehyung lunged between them, catching Jimin by the waist, pulling him back. You bastard! Jimin roared. You let me stay when I should have run. Jungkook didn't fight. Didn't move. Just stood there, bleeding from the mouth, whether metaphorically or not, no one could tell. Taehyung turned to Jungkook, still holding Jimin against his chest. And now what? He demanded. What do we do with this? You say you loved me, but you shattered everything. You say you let him take your place, but you punished him for doing it. Jungkook finally looked him in the eye. You do what I couldn't, he said. You choose. Taehyung's breath caught. Choose. Jungkook nodded. Between your past and your future. He stepped out of the apartment, closing the door behind him without waiting for an answer. Inside, Jimin sank to the floor. His hands trembled. Taehyung crouched beside him, heart beating like a war drum. You don't have to say anything, Jimin whispered. Taehyung didn't. He just reached for Jimin's hand and held it. They sat like that in silence. Outside, the city kept moving. But inside that room, 3 hearts had just stopped pretending. And nothing would be the same again. The next morning, sunlight poured into the apartment like it hadn't been invited, too bright, too clean, too honest. It scraped across the hardwood floors where Jimin had collapsed in silence the night before, cut across the table where Taehyung still sat unmoving, his eyes glassy and unfocused. The apartment reeked of memories. Burnt ones. Jimin stirred first. He rubbed at his face and sat up slowly like his body had aged 10 years in a night. Taehyung hadn't said a word since Jungkook left. Not one. He hadn't even looked at Jimin after that moment on the floor. Jimin's voice cracked through the quiet like a broken string. You hate me now, don't you? Taehyung blinked slowly, then turned his head. No. Jimin swallowed hard. But you should. Taehyung finally met his eyes. And what Jimin saw wasn't hatred, it was grief. Deep, bottomless grief. The kind that made you forget what it felt like to ever be whole. I don't hate you, Taehyung whispered. I just don't know who you are anymore. Jimin stood, heart crumbling in his chest. I never changed, he said. You just never looked close enough. 10:22 a.m. BTS dorm, studio room C. Namjoon sat at the control desk, arms crossed, headphones around his neck, waiting. Jungkook stood near the corner of the room, facing the soundproof glass, headphones on, mic in front of him. The lyrics in his hand were shaking. Junggi entered quietly. You sure you want to record today? He asked. Jungkook nodded. I have to. Namjoon leaned forward. No production filters. No edits. One take. Jungkook nodded again. I want the pain in it. The beat started. A simple piano loop. Sparse. Haunting. Jungkook closed his eyes and sang. I watched you fall in love with the ghost of me. You touched his face, but I bled underneath. I gave you silence when you needed screams. Now I'm the one who can't sleep. Yoongi pressed his lips together. Namjoon's jaw tightened. He held you when I couldn't breathe it. You smiled for him while I buried me. I loved you loud in an empty room. But you kissed him like I left too soon. When the last note died, the studio was so silent it hurt. Yoongi hit the intercom. It's done. Jungkook didn't move. Just stood there. Eyes closed. Head bowed. And then quietly he removed the headphones and walked out of the booth without saying a word. 12:49 p.m. Rooftop HYB building. Jimin found him there. Leaning on the ledge, hair blowing in the soft wind, cigarette untouched between his fingers. You shouldn't be up here, Jimin said. Jungkook didn't look at him. You either. They stood in silence. Jimin moved closer. That song. Jungkook gave a half smile. It wasn't about you. I know, Jimin said softly. It was about him. Finally Jungkook turned. His face was calm now. Almost eerily so. Do you know why I never said it? He asked. Said what? That I loved him. Jimin's chest tightened. Because you were afraid? No, Jungkook dropped the cigarette to the ground and crushed it underfoot. Because I didn't want to ruin him. Jimin frowned. Ruin him? Jungkook looked him dead in the eye. You don't understand what it's like, loving someone who shines like that. You want them to stay perfect. Untouched. You want to protect what the world sees. You think your love would have ruined him? I think what came with it would have. Jimin stepped closer, his voice suddenly sharper. You didn't protect him. You abandoned him. Jungkook's nostrils flared. Don't talk to me about abandonment. I have every right to, Jimin growled. I was the one who picked up the pieces. I was the one who stayed while I watched him fall for you? Jungkook snapped. They stared at each other, two storms meeting in the sky, waiting to explode. And then, you think he fell for me? Jimin said, voice quiet now. Jungkook said nothing. I don't think he ever stopped falling for you. That was the deepest cut. Jungkook didn't flinch, but his eyes betrayed the blow. Jimin shook his head. You think this is about who won him? None of us won. Not you. Not me. He walked away. Jungkook didn't stop him this time. Same time, private family hospital room, Taegu. Taehyung stood by the hospital bed, staring at his father's pale face. The machines beeped softly around him. It had been weeks since his father had spoken. He took his hand. Appa. There was no response. I'm tired. Still silence. I found out everything, Taehyung whispered. The messages. The girl. The betrayal. The love. He exhaled shakily. And I don't know what to do. I don't know if I hate them. Or if I hate myself for not seeing it sooner. He looked up at the ceiling. The tears came hot and fast. I was never enough for either of them, was I? And then, his father moved. Just barely. A twitch in the hand. Taehyung gasped. Appa. His father's eyelids fluttered. Then a rasp, you are enough. Taehyung broke. Fell into the chair beside the bed and cried like the child he used to be. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. 6:11 p.m. back at the dorm. Jungkook sat alone in the living room, watching the sun fade through the blinds. A soft knock came at the door. He opened it. Taehyung. Jungkook stepped back in shock. He hadn't expected him. Not now. Taehyung entered silently. His face unreadable. I saw your song. Jungkook stood still. Did it sound like an apology? No, Taehyung said. It sounded like the truth. Jungkook swallowed. Taehyung didn't move closer. Didn't sit. Just stared at him for a long time. You said you didn't deserve me. I didn't, Jungkook replied. Taehyung nodded. And then he said the last thing Jungkook expected. You were right. Jungkook's breath caught. But I didn't deserve you either. And with that, Taehyung turned and walked away, leaving Jungkook standing in the doorway, watching him vanish into the dark. Neither one of them spoke again that night. But everything had changed. The rain hit the glass windows of the HYB dorm with the weight of 1,000 apologies never spoken. Thick, relentless, and rhythmic. Like a memory that refused to die. Jimin stood in the center of the practice room. The lights dimmed. The mirrors fogged with ghostly reflections. His hoodie clung to his damp skin. The fabric soaked not just from sweat, but from something deeper, rawer. An ache that no choreography could purge. He hadn't danced in hours. He hadn't moved. He just stood there, arms limp at his sides, staring at the place on the floor where Taehyung had once collapsed during rehearsals years ago. The same spot Jungkook had knelt beside him. The same room that had once held 7 souls in harmony, now echoing with silence so sharp it could split bone. The door creaked open. He didn't need to look. Jungkook's reflection appeared behind him. You're still here, Jungkook said. Jimin's voice came out rough, cracked. So are you. Jungkook stepped forward, cautiously, like the room might devour them both if he moved too fast. He stopped only a few feet behind Jimin, their eyes locked in the mirror. Why didn't you leave? Jimin asked. I could ask you the same. Jimin turned slowly. His eyes were tired, but burning. Tell me why you stayed quiet when I was screaming inside. Jungkook blinked. I waited for you, Jimin whispered. Every night. Every goddamn night I told myself you'd come clean. That you'd say something. But you watched me drown and held your breath like you were afraid my truth would stain you. I didn't know how, Jungkook confessed. Jimin's fists clenched. You didn't try. That's the difference. A long silence. I was scared, Jungkook admitted, of what I'd lose, of what I'd become in your eyes. Cowardice doesn't earn sympathy, Jimin said coldly. And you don't get to be the victim of your own lies. Jungkook stepped closer. I didn't lie about how I felt. No, Jimin spat. You just buried it. You let it rot between us until it became something we could never name without bleeding. His voice broke. I loved him too, you know? Jungkook froze. Jimin's voice softened into something unbearably fragile. I loved him in the shadows. I loved him in the silences you left. And I hated myself every time he called your name in his sleep. Jungkook's eyes watered, lips parting, but no words came. He didn't know, Jimin said, shaking, because I never told him, because I knew he didn't belong to me, and I respected that. I carried that pain quietly, like armor. And you, he stepped forward and jabbed a finger against Jungkook's chest. You destroyed everything without even realizing who was bleeding beneath it all. Jungkook exhaled. I knew. Jimin recoiled. What? I knew you loved him, Jungkook said softly. I saw it every time you looked at him. I saw the way your shoulders tightened when he hugged me, the way you smiled when he wasn't looking. I saw everything. Then why? Because I wanted him to love me first, Jungkook confessed. I wanted to win. The room turned to ice. Jimin stepped back, like he'd been punched in the chest. You're a monster. I know. No, Jimin said, voice rising. You don't get to say that and expect forgiveness. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Jungkook said, stepping forward. I'm asking for truth. Jimin glared at him. Then here's the truth. If you told him everything tonight, he'd still pick you. That landed like an earthquake. And Jungkook knew it was true. Jimin's voice was low now, shaking. He never looked at me the way he looked at you. Not once. And I kept thinking if I loved him harder, longer, quieter, he might see me. But he never did. Because even when you hurt him, even when you vanished, he still left space for you. Tears gathered at the edges of his eyes. And I hate him for that. Jungkook whispered. So do I. They stood there. Two broken men mourning the same love, cursed to walk in the same shadow. Taehyung walked the garden path behind the house barefoot, the cold grass biting his soles, the wind sharp against his skin. The stars above were blurry, scattered by the tears he didn't realize had spilled. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Unknown number. I heard what happened. You need to come home. Real home. He stared at the message, then at the name below it. Taehyung's mother. He hadn't spoken to her in over a year. Not since she'd disapproved of his career decisions. Not since she called Jungkook dangerous. He deleted the message. He wasn't running back to safety. Not when the storm was his to weather. Back inside, he found an envelope his father had left on the side table, unopened. A letter in his father's handwriting. He sat down, hands trembling, and unfolded the page. Asterisk, my son. If you are reading this, it means I'm asleep longer than I hoped. I won't speak of regrets. Only truths. You love deeply. That is your gift. But also your curse. Don't run from pain. Run through it. Face what scares you. And choose people who don't let you disappear in your own silence. Not everyone who loves you will be brave enough to say it. But you'll know it by who stays when you shatter. Asterisk. Taehyung wiped his face, breathing through the wreckage in his chest. There were no right choices. Only honest ones. Late night. HYB studio hallway. Jimin exited the practice room and nearly collided with Hoseok. He stepped back. You okay? Hoseok asked. Jimin didn't answer. Hoseok looked at him for a long moment. He's not the same, you know. Jungkook. I know. Neither are you. I wish I was. Hoseok nodded. That's the problem with surviving. You never go back. You just carry more. And then, gently, have you told Taehyung? Told him what? That you stayed behind for him. Not because you were trapped, but because you chose him over your own healing. Jimin's face twisted. He doesn't want to hear that. Doesn't mean he doesn't need to. Hoseok walked away. Jimin stared after him, haunted by the weight of what was unsaid. Early morning. BTS group chat. Jeon. Rehearsal at 10 a.m. sharp. No exceptions. Yoongi. Bring your honesty. Leave the ego. Namjoon. Time to decide what kind of legacy we want to leave behind. Taehyung. I'm coming. Jimin. Me too. Jungkook. Let's finish what we started. 7 messages. No emojis. No apologies. Just war cries disguised as commitment. Because tomorrow they wouldn't just sing. They'd bleed. Together. Or not at all. The rehearsal room wasn't just a place anymore. It was a battlefield. 10 a.m. sharp. The doors slammed behind the 7 of them. No stylists. No managers. No outside noise. Just BTS. The original 7. Or whatever was left of them after the weeks of revelations, heartbreak, and words that sliced deeper than any lyric ever had. The mirrors offered no escape. The floor beneath them didn't tremble with music. It trembled with the weight of everything unspoken. Taehyung stood in the center of the room, his eyes sharp, shoulders squared, as if he'd aged 10 years in the last 3 days. Jimin was the first to enter after him, followed closely by Jungkook, eyes dark, jaw set. Namjoon, Jeon, Yoongi, and Hoseok took their places around the perimeter like a jury preparing to hear a case too personal to judge. No one spoke, until Taehyung did. If anyone walks out today, he said, voice firm, don't come back. The silence after that was cold and absolute. Then he added, start the track. Yoongi hit the control panel. The instrumental began one of their older songs chosen deliberately. A track that once celebrated unity, brotherhood, trust. Jimin flinched. Jungkook didn't move. But Taehyung stepped forward, slowly, methodically, as the beat pulsed into the room like a ticking bomb. And then he moved. Every motion was precise, sharp, filled with rage masked as choreography. Every line of his body told a story of betrayal, longing, shame, defiance. His feet struck the floor like accusations. His breath came in gasps. He didn't perform. He exorcised. When the first chorus hit, Jimin stepped in. And the room shifted. The harmony was muscle memory. But the chemistry was a knife. Their movements circled each other. Charged, electric, haunted. Every near touch was deliberate and dangerous, like magnets trying not to destroy each other. Jimin's fingers brushed the sleeve of Taehyung's shirt, and Taehyung recoiled. Not because he hated him, but because he couldn't afford to want it again. Jungkook joined next, and when he did, everything broke. He didn't dance with the others. He danced against them. Every movement was violent, every beat a strike. His eyes never left Taehyung, never left Jimin. His presence was a challenge, a scream, a dare. Then the bridge arrived. And it happened. The music cut. No one moved. Just the echo of breath and the sound of one truth, spoken aloud for the first time. You want redemption? Taehyung said, walking toward Jungkook slowly. Then bleed for it. Jungkook didn't blink. I already have. No, Taehyung hissed. You watched us bleed. And you waited for the wound to heal itself. You want forgiveness? You want a clean slate? He shoved Jungkook's chest. Earn it. Jungkook's voice dropped low. Then hit me. Taehyung blinked. Jungkook stepped closer. Go ahead. You want closure? You want revenge? You want a headline? Do it. Stop, Jimin whispered. Too late. Do it, Jungkook repeated. Hit me like I hit your heart. Taehyung's fists trembled. Jimin lunged forward, grabbing his wrist just as it began to rise. Don't, he breathed. Don't give him the pain he wants. Give him the truth he ran from. And in that instant, something cracked. Not in Taehyung's fist, but in his chest. He dropped his arm. I don't want to break you, Taehyung said softly. I want you to feel it, the way I did. Every night you left me wondering if I wasn't enough. Every night Jimin sat beside me pretending he didn't love me, because he thought he didn't deserve to. Jungkook's lips parted. He told you. He didn't have to. And then Taehyung turned to Jimin. You stayed, he said. You stayed even when I didn't know how to love you back. Even when you were never supposed to be the one holding me. And I hurt you. I let you carry me while I looked for someone who was already gone. Jimin's eyes glistened. I'm sorry, Taehyung said. Jungkook stepped back. Like those words pierced him more than any punch could. Jimin finally spoke. Do you know how hard it is to love two people who don't love themselves? Neither of them answered. I'm done trying to heal what won't be touched, Jimin said. He walked to the door. And this time he didn't look back. Later, dorm kitchen. Yoongi sat alone, sipping coffee in silence. Jean walked in and leaned against the fridge. Did you see that coming? Yoongi nodded. Every second of it. Jean sighed. So what now? Yoongi looked up. Now they have to rebuild. Or burn everything down. Midnight Seoul Bridge. Taehyung stood on the edge, coat wrapped tight around him, hair whipped by the wind. He looked out at the river, at the city that made them, broke them, worshipped them. A soft footstep behind him. Jungkook. He stood beside him, not saying anything for a long while. Finally, Jungkook asked, Do you believe I ever loved you? Taehyung didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking at him, he said, I know you did. Jungkook closed his eyes. But it wasn't love that hurt me, Taehyung continued. It was the silence that followed it. Another beat of silence. Then Jungkook said, Then let me speak now. He turned to Taehyung. I loved you like a fool, like a coward. I buried it in other people, in fame, in fear. And when you needed me most, I made you feel alone. I will regret that until the day I stop breathing. Taehyung turned to him. And Jimin? Jungkook's voice shook. He deserved more than both of us. And he still does. They stared at each other, two halves of a ruined whole. Taehyung exhaled slowly. I'm tired. Me too. I don't know if I'll ever trust you again. You don't have to, Jungkook said. Just don't forget me. A long pause. I won't, Taehyung said. And together, without another word, they stood over the river. Not healed, not forgiven, but finally seen. The dorm was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a building collapses. Not the crash itself, but the stillness when the dust starts to settle and the air tastes like rubble. Jimin returned alone. The others had gone their separate ways after the confrontation. No one sure if this was the beginning of healing or the final unraveling. He walked past the kitchen, past the studio door, past Jungkook's empty room, and then stopped. Taehyung's door was ajar. Just slightly. Jimin hesitated, hand trembling above the doorknob. He hadn't been in this room since last winter, back when things were still unspoken, and silence had the illusion of safety. He pushed it open. Taehyung was inside, sitting on the edge of the bed, a bottle of something untouched on the nightstand, his guitar resting against his thigh. He didn't look up. I didn't think you'd come, he said. I didn't think I would either, Jimin replied. A beat. You left. I had to, Jimin whispered. I couldn't breathe. Taehyung finally looked at him. And there it was, the weight of too many yesterdays. I told him I knew he loved me, Taehyung said, voice almost calm. Jimin closed the door behind him. And I told him he hurt me more with silence than with betrayal. Jimin nodded. Taehyung looked down at his hands. You once asked me if I ever looked at you the way I looked at him. Jimin swallowed. I did. Taehyung said softly. But it scared me. Why? Because you were real. Jimin blinked. And he wasn't? No. He was an idea. A dream I held onto because I didn't want to face the fact that someone right in front of me could see me better than I saw myself. The words sank in. Jimin stepped forward. Then why did you let me stay? Taehyung's voice broke. Because I was selfish. Jimin shook his head. No. You were careful. That's the difference. You let me stay close enough to touch you, but never close enough to hold you. You needed me until you didn't. Taehyung stood. His eyes glistened. That's not true. Then tell me what it is. Taehyung took a step closer, breath shallow. You were the only person who stayed when I hated myself. When my father collapsed. When Jungkook disappeared. You sat in my silence and made it feel less like death. He looked away. But I didn't know how to love you without making you a shadow. Jimin's lips trembled. You were always more than that. Taehyung whispered. You were the light. I just never thought I deserved it. And finally, Jimin cracked. His voice was low, hollow. I gave you everything. I held your hand in the dark while you whispered someone else's name in your sleep. I wrote songs you'll never hear and cried in showers you never noticed. A pause. I would have burned the world for you. Taehyung closed his eyes. I know. And you let me stay, Jimin said, stepping forward, tears welling. You let me stay like a placeholder. Like an intermission in the play where he was always the leading man. I didn't mean to. But you did it anyway. They stood inches apart. Both breaking. Both bleeding. I don't know what you want from me, Jimin said. An apology? A confession? I've already given everything. Taehyung looked at him with all the sorrow in the world. I just wanted time. You had years. I wasn't ready then. And now. Taehyung stepped forward and touched his face. Gently, reverently. I'm ready to lose everything, he said. If it means telling you that I should have chosen you. The words came too late. Jimin flinched, pulled away. No, he said. You don't get to choose me now that he's gone. Jimin. You should have chosen me when it mattered. When I was breaking beside you. Not now. Not because he walked away. The words were fire. And Taehyung had no defense. Jimin turned and opened the door. But before he could leave, he paused. I'll always love you, he whispered. But loving you and trusting you are not the same. And he walked out. Jungkook sat alone at the piano, fingers idle on the keys. He hadn't moved in hours. His phone buzzed beside him. Hoseok, you okay? He didn't reply. Instead, he turned on the mic, hit record, and began to play. A haunting melody. A requiem for a trio that could never be whole. His voice cracked as he sang. You stood beside him, while I vanished in the haze, and I hated him for loving you, the same way I did too late. His tears dripped onto the keys. The track ended, but the ache didn't. The company executives sat in a row, eyes tense, mouths thin. Bang Si-hyuk stood at the front. You've given us chaos, he said to the seven of them. Now give us a decision. No one spoke, until Namjoon did. We want to perform, he said. Yoongi added, but on our own terms. Jean leaned forward. No fake press. No scripted reunion. Taehyung looked at the others, then spoke clearly. No forgiveness tour. No PR cleanup. Just truth. Bang stared at them, then nodded. You have 3 nights, he said. 1 concert. 1 chance. Show them who you really are. 3 days later, Seoul Stadium. Night 1. The lights dimmed. The crowd roared. And the 7 stepped onto the stage. No smiles. No introductions. Just silence. And then Taehyung walked to the mic. And for the first time told the world everything. Not in words, but in a song. One written in pain. One performed in blood. One that shattered everything they thought they knew about BTS. And when it ended, they didn't bow. They just stood there. Exposed. Together. But not the same. For oh, the night air wrapped around the stadium like a noose. Thick. Electric. Unforgiving. 70,000 voices screamed in unison, but not a single one of them knew what was coming. There was no flashy intro, no pre-recorded VCR, no countdown timer to hype the crowd into frenzy. Just darkness, and the slow thud of a heartbeat echoing through the speakers. And then one spotlight, Taehyung, standing dead center, alone. He wore all black. No embellishments, no sparkles, no armor. Just skin, breath, and scars hidden under the fabric. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes were burning. Behind him, 6 silhouettes stood motionless. The members, his brothers, who had bled beside him and against him. Some out of loyalty, some out of love, some out of guilt. The music began, but it wasn't a track anyone recognized. It was new, a song born in a studio no one had access to, a song written from bruises, from betrayal, from words spoken too late. And it wasn't meant to be beautiful. It was meant to hurt. This isn't a comeback. It's a confession. I lied to you when I smiled. I bled behind the curtain. I touched hands that never held me back. I kissed wounds that weren't mine to heal. Each line hit the audience like a shockwave. Taehyung's voice cracked on the high notes, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. This wasn't a performance, it was a purge. Behind him, the others joined in one by one. Jungkook was next. He didn't sing backup. He took a verse, and his voice was raw. I ran when I should have stood still. I held her hand when I wanted his. I let silence rot the bond one once built. And I never said sorry. Not really. The crowd gasped. Armies looked at each other, unsure if what they were hearing was scripted or real. Some started to cry. Some stood frozen. Jimin stepped forward next, and his voice, delicate and broken, filled the air like shattered glass. I stayed when I should have walked. I begged for crumbs and called it love. I hated myself more than you ever could. And I loved both of you in silence. The screams were deafening, but none of them heard it. On stage, they were inside the storm 2 hours before the show. The 7 of them sat in a circle in the green room. Not facing a script. Not facing a camera. Facing each other. No staff. No managers. Just raw, trembling truths. I'm not okay, Jungkook admitted. And I might not be for a while. Same, Jimin said. But I'm not afraid of the pain anymore. I want this to mean something, Taehyung added. Not for the fans. Not for the company. For us. Namjoon nodded. Then we tell them the truth. Not just what we've done, but who we've become. Even if it ruins the image? Hoseok asked. Especially if it does, Yoongi replied. Silence. Then Jean smiled faintly. Let's set fire to the masks then. Back on stage. Final chorus. The 7 stood in a single line, microphones lowered, eyes locked on the crowd that had grown dead silent. No music now, just Taehyung's voice, soft and trembling. I was supposed to love one of them. I loved them both. And the stadium exploded. The headlines would call it chaos, an implosion, a scandal. But for them it was freedom. After the show, 2:16 a.m., empty dressing room. Jimin sat on the floor, barefoot, face buried in his arms. He hadn't cried on stage. He hadn't let it out in front of the world. But now the dam broke. Footsteps approached, but he didn't look up. A warm hand rested on his back. Taehyung. He knelt beside him, pulled him into his arms, and held him like he had months ago, when everything first started to unravel. I'm here, Taehyung whispered. Jimin sobbed into his shoulder. Why does it still hurt? Because we loved real. Jimin clutched his shirt. And now, Taehyung pulled back, just enough to see him. Now we survive. Jungkook sat alone again. But this time he wasn't playing a melody. He was deleting one. Track after track, years of unfinished songs, drafts he wrote in secret for Taehyung, for Jimin, for the versions of them that no longer existed. One file remained. He hovered over it. A demo titled, The One I Let Go. He hit play. It wasn't polished. Just his voice, a guitar, and one truth. It wasn't polished. Just his voice, a guitar, and one truth. You smiled in another man's arms. while I drank myself into silence. But even now, if you turned around, I'd still open the door. Tears ran down his face as he finally hit save. Not delete. Not this time. The sky was turning pale, washed in blue and regret. Taehyung walked alone through the empty street, hoodie up, mask on. The city didn't know what he'd just done, that he'd ripped his heart open on a stage built for perfection. He passed a coffee shop where they used to hide, a graffiti wall where he once carved 7 with his key. And then his phone buzzed. A message from Jungkook. Thank you for the truth. I'm sorry it came too late. Another one from Jimin. We said what needed to be said. Now let's see who still loves us after the fall. Taehyung stared at the screen, then typed back. Maybe the fall is what sets us free. And with that, he disappeared into the dawn. Not healed, not whole, but finally, honest. Rain again. Not the cinematic drizzle of a healing montage. No, this was the kind that slammed the city like punishment. Merciless, cold, and chaotic. Seoul was soaked in shadows, and so was the studio where they gathered once more. Not as idols, not as performers, not even as friends, but as survivors. 1 week had passed since the concert that shook the nation. 1 week since the internet split itself into 2 camps. Those who mourned the shattered illusion of BTS and those who whispered, finally, the truth. The 7 entered the room in silence. No stylists, no entourage, just bruises still healing beneath sleeves and eyes that hadn't known peace in months. Namjoon was the first to speak. Today's not for performance, he said. It's for answers. No one disagreed. Taehyung stood by the window, watching the rain carve paths down the glass. Jimin sat with his arms folded, body rigid like a coiled spring. Jungkook paced the room, eyes down, jaw tight. The others stood back, guards raised, like they knew the air might ignite with a single word. Then Namjoon asked the question no one else had dared to vocalize. Do we still want this? The question hung there like a guillotine. Yoongi broke the silence. Want what? The group? The fame? Or the lie? No one answered. Because, Yoongi continued, we can't have all 3. Taehyung turned from the window. Then let's kill the lie first. Jean nodded slowly. Which one? The one where we pretend we're okay, Taehyung said. The one where we smile for the fans while cutting each other open behind the scenes. Jimin's voice was low. We didn't cut each other. You both cut me. Jungkook stopped pacing. Taehyung flinched. I gave everything I had to the both of you, Jimin said, rising from his chair. And you treated me like collateral damage. Like the war was only between you two and I just happened to stand in the blast radius. Taehyung took a step forward. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, Jimin snapped. And not by loving him. By using me to survive loving him. Jungkook stepped in, voice sharp. Then blame me. I'm the one who left. I'm the one who broke him. No, Jimin said, turning on him. You didn't break him. He was already broken when you loved him. You just didn't stay to pick up the pieces. Jungkook looked like he'd been slapped. You think I didn't want to? You think I didn't? Taehyung interrupted, voice barely above a whisper. Then why didn't you? Jungkook turned to him, fury igniting. Because I was drowning too. Taehyung's fists clenched. Jungkook continued, trembling. Because every time I tried to reach for you, I saw him in your shadow, and I didn't know who you wanted. Me or the version of me you created. I wanted you, Taehyung shouted. But you disappeared the moment I needed you to stay. And you let him replace me, Jungkook spat.